Test, test, test. Good morning. Test. Good morning. Happy Christmas. Hope you all had a great Christmas. You know, the 18th century Scottish poet, Robert Burns, he was plowing his field one day and he overturned a nest of mice, and the mice went everywhere. And that prompted Burns to sit down and write the poem. And he said, "The best laid schemes of mice and men gang af agley." Now that's Scottish words. What he meant in our terms was the best laid plans of mice and men often go wrong. In 2021 vernacular, we'd say the best laid plans of mice and men often get messed up because of COVID, right? So I say all that to say our plans went wrong today. Mike Johns was actually going to teach today, had his lesson all prepared and was going to teach today, and Mike came down with COVID. Yeah, the best laid plans, right? So Mike calls me and says, I can't teach. Would you teach? And so Mike already had his lesson all prepared in the book of Exodus. So we thought, all right, you keep your lesson. You've already got it all prepared. I have the lesson next week. So I'll just skip over and do my lesson. And then we'll come back next week, God willing, and the COVID gone. We'll come back next week and we'll pick up Mike's lesson. So we've been kind of going through the book of Exodus chronologically. So we're going to get a little bit off chronologically then. We're going to jump ahead a little bit to my lesson. We're going to come back next week to Mike's lesson. So we'll be a little bit off time-wise, but the messages are good. The messages are still the same. We're going to be looking at the book of Exodus, as I mentioned. The subject, as it says, from captivity to wilderness. So you know the book of Exodus does not include all of the wilderness. So we'll also get into the book of Leviticus and Numbers in this class too, as we get to that wilderness section. We've already got them out of captivity. We got them kind of in a wandering, and we're going to go from wandering to wilderness, so in the book of Exodus. Now, see, God's plan all along was he was going to establish Israel to be his people. He was going to dwell with them. He was going to provide for them. He gave them the law. So he established Israel to be his people. In return, all he asked them to do was to obey his law, to worship him, to stop worshiping other idols, and to worship him alone. And we see that the Lord kept his commandment. He kept his commitment. He made a promise to them, and he kept his commitment. The Lord always keeps his commitment. But people are a little bit different, aren't we? Humans have a way of turning our back on God. Even when God promises us and provides for us, gives us certain things, people have a way of turning their back on God. And here we are with the Israelites who have been crying for years, for decades, for centuries to be free, and now God has made them free, allowed them to escape their slavery, brought them out of Egypt. They're wandering somewhat in the desert, and now we see things turn a little bit. Now, I don't know, this map is hard to see, I'm sure, for all of you, but back it up here. So here's where they started in the upper Egypt in Ramses, the city of Ramses up here is where they started. And they moved down and they crossed the Red Sea. This is what Mike was going to talk about. Mike was going to talk about the Red Sea. So he'll do that. The Red Sea's still there. He'll get to it. And then they come on down here into the wilderness of Ethan here. You see Mara, Elam. They get down to Rephidim. And this is kind of where we pick up, where we're going to pick up today. Now, as Larry talked last week, they left in the middle of the month of Nisan. God said, this will be your first month from now on. They traveled for about a month. So this is about a month later, they're down here. Now, this is 360 miles from here to here, about 600 kilometers. So they went from here to here, 360 miles in a month. That's pretty good, considering the size of the tribe, how many people were involved, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But they get down here in Rephidim, been gone a month, and then all of a sudden, they start complaining. So we're going to look at 3 points. The main part of this lesson today is going to be simple. God provides. That's going to be our theme. God provides. And we see that they're down here in Rephidim, and we see the Lord's provision tests his people's obedience. Let's look at this verse. I hope you can see this. Exodus 6, 2 through 5. If you can't see this, you can look in your Bible. You know, God cares for all our needs, and at some point we just forget that. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and the people of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out of the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily." All right, so we're going to look at that in a little more detail later. But, all right, so the Israelites are running out of water, and they're running out of food, and God could just as easily provided food and water. Every few miles, food and water. You go a little bit, food and water. You go a little bit, food and water. God could have done that easily. But he's putting them to the test here. They don't have food. They don't have water. What are they going to do? Here's what they did. They grumbled and they complained. They judged their situation solely from their selfish needs. They forget what God had done. They forget what God had promised. They just started grumbling. Now this grumbling, even though you see they directed it to Moses and Aaron, the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. This is what that verse said. They directed it to Moses and Aaron, but they're rejecting God. They're forgetting God's promise. They're turning their back on God. And they start grumbling. Now, it's interesting that they reminisced about the good old days in Egypt. Back in the good old days, 30 days ago, we had all this food. They actually had all this pain. But they forget about that. You know, in Psalms 78, verse 18 through 20, and the psalmist is talking about this very incident here. And he said the people, he worded it in kind of way, the people wanted what they wanted. So they were thinking about those days and they wanted what they wanted. That's different from wanting what you need. The people didn't think about what they needed. They think about what they wanted. There's a difference there, right? We see that difference. And sometimes we want what we want. And we forget we should want what we need. So the Lord told Moses, I'll provide for them. He was going to provide for them all along. And he told them, I'll provide for them. And I'm going to give them bread for them to eat. But his gift came to him as a test. A couple of different tests. He wanted to see how they would react when things started going bad with them. Would they continue to obey him? Would they continue to worship him? Would they continue to praise him? And he told them how to gather this food. And on certain days, they were supposed to gather a double portion. And again, we're going to see more detail about this in a moment. And not gather any the next day. That's a test again. That's a test. So today you get twice as much, because tomorrow there won't be any. So he's testing them here, and we see that they fail this test again. So he puts them in these situations to see how they'll react. In this case, they reacted with grumbling and complaining. And this is a complaint against God, and this is a rejection of God, and this is a distrust of God, that he's promised he'll provide for them, and he just does not trust it. This is a kind of a trial. And so far, they've kind of failed that trial. I think back. If you could go back in time, if you could go back and say, I would like to eliminate certain things in my life. Let me tell you a story. Illustrate this point. When our grandson was about 6 or 7, we went down to Universal Studios in Florida. And they had this Jurassic Park ride. Anybody ever rid that Jurassic Park ride at Universal? You go through on a kind of a water ride, and they've got dinosaurs and everything. And you come to this last one, and you're going on this hill, and as you go, this giant Tyrannosaurus Rex comes out at you. Out of nowhere, Tyrannosaurus Rex. And you get right to his mouth, and you drop down. It's a pretty good ride. Old Grandpa probably shouldn't have taken his 6-year-old on this ride. So the next morning, I'm sitting there eating breakfast, and I say, Brett, what do you really think about that Jurassic Park ride? And his 6-year-old wise grandson looked at me and said, if I had it to do all over again, I would build me a time machine, and I would go back in time, and I would not ride that ride. And I think of our lives, if we had a chance to build a time machine and go back in time, what would we eliminate? We would probably eliminate the hard times, wouldn't we? The Tyrannosaurus Rex of our lives. I wouldn't do that. That was too hard. I do this. This is fun. But I wouldn't do this. If I had a chance again, I wouldn't do this. But stop and think where you are today. You are what you are who you are because of not only the good things that happen to you, but you are what you are because of the hard things that happen to you. Right? We're studying James in our Connect group, and that second verse in James catches us all. What does he say? Remember what he says? Consider it pure joy when you are tried, when you are tested. That's hard for us to say, oh man, I'm being tested. I'm being tried. Great. Well, I'm joyful. That's great. It's hard for us to do that, isn't it? It's hard for us when we're in the midst of a trial to say, this is really great. But James says, tests lead us to perseverance. Tests lead us to faith. Tests lead us to trust. If we had no bad things to happen to us in our lives, what kind of people would we be today? Would we not need God? Would we not want God? Would we be able to cope if something bad did happen to us? So test leads to trust. And so far, step one, the Israelites failed their first test. You know, there's a song that says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We are what we are. We endure what we endure because we've been tested and we still have faith and we still have trust in God. Let's look at a second point. So God provides for us even despite our failings. Even because we fail him. Even because we grumble, even because we complain, God still provides for us. He continues to provide for us. Let's look at Exodus 16, 13 through 20. It's a long verse. Let me read this. So we talked about, he talked about the bread. So here it's a little more detail. In the evening, quail came up and covered the camp, and in the morning, dew lay around the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it, and each one of you, as much as you can eat. You shall take an omer according to the number of persons that each of you has in his tent. And the people of Israel did so. They gathered some more, some less. And when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat, and Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over till the morning. But they did not listen to Moses. And some left part of it till the morning, and it bred worms and stank, and Moses was angry with them. Let's skip to verse 27. On the seventh day, some of the people went out together, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and the law? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out on his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. So the people said, what is it? And the Hebrew word for what is it is manna. So they said, manna. And Moses said, manna. No, manna. Manna. It's like, who's on first? What's on second? There came, says Moses, what is this? And Moses said, it is what it is. What is it? It's manna. Manna from heaven. So just as God promised, he provided food for them. He was going to provide food for them all along. It was in his plan. But he provided food for them. He could have given them food before they complained. He just wanted to see what they were going to do. Psalm 78:23 calls manna the bread of angels. The bread of angels, since it fell from heaven. It's interesting, we see Jesus talks about bread a lot, doesn't he? The bread of life. Now, he told him, don't hoard. You're going to get what you need. You're going to get as much as you need. And on that sixth day, it's interesting that if you got too much the next day, worms. But on that sixth day, he wants you to gather twice as much because it would last the seventh day. And then on the seventh day, it didn't turn to worms. So God had this all worked out. And he told him, don't hoard leftovers. Take what you need, and I'll see to it that you get what you need. And those who don't have enough, I'll see that you get what you need. And those who get too much, boom, I'll see you only get what you need, because the rest of it ruins. So that's his point again. If you think you can hoard the leftovers for the next day, then you don't believe God when he says, I will give you enough to get you through the day. I will give you enough to get you through the day. And when those people hoarded the leftovers, they're saying, I don't believe God is going to give me enough to get me through the day. They're showing their distrust of God. What's the song we sing? Lamentations 3:22. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning, and great is your faithfulness. See, that kind of comes from here. Every morning, God is going to provide for you every morning. Let's see what kind of faithfulness you got. And some of those people didn't have the faithfulness. But despite their distrust, despite their unfaith, God continued to provide for them, didn't he? What's that? Jehovah Jireh. Very good. Jehovah Jireh. Yeah. Jehovah. We talked a couple weeks ago about Jehovah meaning the Lord God. When Abraham took Isaac to the mountain to sacrifice, and Isaac said, where where is the lamb? Where is the lamb? Abraham said, Jehovah Jireh, which literally means God will provide. And God provided the lamb, spared Isaac and provided the lamb. So, very good point. That's what that ought to be our mantra, shouldn't it? It was Abraham's mantra, Jehovah Jireh, God will provide, despite our distrust. God will provide. He said, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? But still, he provided. So God provides. He's gracious in response to the people's demands. You know, the people demanding food. They complained, they grumbled, they demanded food, and God could have said easily, that's it. Until you guys come to your knees, until you guys humble yourself, I'm not giving you a thing. But God didn't, did he? Let's look at Exodus 17, verses 2 through 7. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. And Moses said to them, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord? But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us with our children and our livestock and thirst? And Moses cried to the Lord, what shall I do with this people, with these people? They're almost ready to stone me. You know, under the law, if you tried to kill somebody, you could be stoned. And so Moses said, they're ready to stone me. And the Lord said to Moses, pass on before the people, take in with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile. The same staff that you struck the Nile with. And behold, I will stand before you there on the rock of Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and the water shall come out of it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah because of the quarreling of the people of Israel, and because they tested the Lord by saying, is the Lord among us or not? Give us water to drink, please. Well, it doesn't say please, does it? It doesn't say please. Give us water to drink. A demand. And they said Moses wanted to kill them. Moses brought them out of Egypt for the purpose of killing them. That doesn't even sound logical, does it? But here's the question. Is the Lord among us or not? Have you ever asked that question? I'm pretty sure I have. I'm pretty sure I've said that. Is the Lord here or not? Does the Lord care or not? And that's what the people did. Because they didn't trust God. They didn't have faith in God. And sometimes when I think that, is God here or not? Then that shows my distrust. That shows my lack of faith. And that's a question we gotta throw out of our vocabulary. So the Lord instructed Moses to take up his staff and hit the rock. So even though they demanded, as sinful as they were, the Lord gave them what they demanded. I find it interesting in that verse 6, I think it was. And God said, I will stand on the rock. I will stand on the rock. I will stand before you there on the rock, and you shall strike the rock, and the water shall come out. So God said, I'm going to stand on the rock, you strike the rock. Wait a minute. If I do that, I'm striking the Lord. I'm striking the Lord. He's putting himself between the people and what they need. Kind of like Jesus did, right? Jesus put himself between us and death, and we strike Jesus. On the cross, we struck him. And we strike him anytime we deny him. And he named this place Massa and Meribah. And that's Hebrew words for Massa means to test. And Meribah, to bring a complaint against. So Moses picked these two names not because they said God provides. He picked the name of these two places because God tested you and you brought a complaint against him. So he named them Massa and Meribah. So in their complaining to Moses, the Israelites, they tested God, didn't they? They were turning the table. They were testing God. Let's see you bring us. Give us this food. Give us this water. They were testing God when God was testing them. And we should never test God. Act like we've earned something. Act like we deserve something. So we're going to test God. Testing God means we doubt God. Testing God means we distrust God. So we should never test God. Is God among us? He's proved it over and over. He's among us. Let's go back to this verse here. This is what Julie talked about. This is what I talked about earlier. So when he was going to kill Isaac, he called the place Jehovah Jireh. The Lord will provide. And on that day, when he was going to sacrifice Isaac, the Lord provided. The Lord will provide. Let's don't test him. Let's have faith. Let's trust him. And when we do, what happens? Philippians 4:19, and my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. He will provide. He will meet our needs. If we have trust, if we have faith, if we don't test. So as I said, that was the lesson. God provides. He's always there. He's always among us, even where sometimes we wonder. He is among us. It's just we just need to keep that faith strong. Trials make us stronger. Trials make us what we are today. We don't want to avoid the trials. We want to persevere through the trials. Appreciate your attendance. Next week, hopefully Mike will be here, and we'll back up a little bit, and we'll get on back in the order of the lesson, and we'll continue through the book of Exodus for a while. Thank you very much. Glad to see all of you. Hey, I won't see you probably the next year, so that's not the first time you've heard that, is it? It won't be the last. But we'll see you next week.